So, we've been working on our right triangles. The first thing to do with right triangles is Pythagorean theorem. So Pythagorean theorem works really good if I know two sides and I need to find the third. That's kind of the purpose of Pythagorean theorem. Then we were looking at special right triangles. Special right triangles, those were our 45, 45, and our 30, 60. Those work if you've got, like I said, the 45 or the 30, 60, and you know one side. You can use that one side to find everything else. Trig functions or trigonometry can be used if you know either two sides, you can find some angles, or if you know a side and an angle, you can find other stuff also. So the first thing I want to do is just get the trig functions up here. So I'm going to go ahead and write the trig functions up here. So that's where that SOHCAHTOA came from. There's other ways that people remember it. I guess I'm old school. SOHCAHTOA is what I learned. It's just what everybody seems to go to. So, sine. Now, I know this looks like sin. The actual full thing has an E, which makes it sine, but everybody just goes at S-I-N for sine, is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's the sine. So these trig relationships kind of say the relationship between two sides of a right triangle. So that's sine. Cosine, ca, C-A-H, is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay. Tangent. The last part was TOA, T-O-A, which is tangent is opposite over adjacent. Now this first worksheet, we're not really actually solving anything. We're just trying to understand these relationships. So the first worksheet is just kind of understanding some relationships. Then the second worksheet is when we actually get to solving some things. So I'll give you a moment to write that down. And then we'll go and start taking a look at the problems. You'll see a couple people writing. So let's take a look. So this first one, we're looking at sine. And we're looking at the sine of z. So z is the angle we're referring from. So I'm going to come down here and circle the z. So that way I know that's the angle that everything's being based on. I always like to mark the hypotenuse first. It's the easiest side to recognize. So looking at number one, which side is the hypotenuse? 17. It's always the longest side, always the biggest side. It's also always across from the 90. So that's the H. So I'm going to put an H there for hypotenuse. Now the other two are opposite and adjacent. So if you're standing at the angle and I walk across the triangle, I'm going to hit the opposite side. So the 15 is the opposite. So 8 must be adjacent. And that's the order I usually do things in. There's less chance of getting confused on a particular side. Now side from up top, we already said was opposite hypotenuse. And I'm just abbreviating to the O's and the H's. A little less to write. Now I just write the fraction. So the O is what number? 15. The H is which number? 17. Now on this worksheet, that's all we're doing. Like I said, we're not really actually solving anything. We're just trying to understand some relationships. So in this case, if I'm talking about the sine of angle Z, the sine is the relationship between those two sides, which is 15 over 17. Are we okay on number 1? So number 2, same process. Hypotenuse. Which one is the hypotenuse? 17. So I'm going to put an H there. Now, I'm going from C. So from C, what is opposite? H. So H the opposite. So adjacent must be the 15, which is next door, which is it. And that's why I like to mark the A for H first, so that way I don't get those two confused. Well, cosine is adjacent hypotenuse. And I'll give you those relationships. When we get to a quiz, I'll let you know those. I mean, hopefully by the time we get to a quiz, you'll know them. But if you don't, I'll give them to you. Now, it just happens to work out this way. It wasn't on purpose. But what's the A? 15. What's the H? 17. So it did happen to be the same thing as this one, but that was just coincidence. I didn't purposely do that.
So after you find the hypotenuse, wait, what's the step after find the adjacent?
I generally find the hypotenuse first, the longest side.
Right.
Then whatever angle's marked up here,
Okay.
I circled that, then I find the opposite.
Okay.
1, 2, we good? Moving on to 3, 4. Now you'll notice number 3 is a tan. So basically I've done one of each type when I get done with this one. So tan. Which one's the hypotenuse? 45. So mark that. C is where I'm standing at. So circle the C. That's where I'm working from. So if I walk across the triangle from C, what side am I going to run into? 36. So the 36 is the opposite. Because you always got to figure out what side you're working from. Or what angle you're working from. So the adjacent must be 27. It's the only one left over. Well, tan we said was opposite adjacent, TOA. So opposite, what number is at the opposite? 36. What number is at the adjacent? 27. Now, yes, you could reduce that, but I'm not even worried about you reducing it. It's one more place you might make a mistake. You can type that number in just as well as you can type a reduced fraction in when you get to kind of the next step. So don't even worry about reducing. Just leave it 36 over 27. The first 3, are we okay? Now you'll notice 4, 5, and 6 has one of each type again. I want you to try 4, 5, 6. Try 4, 5, 6. When you have them, let me take a look, see if they look good. 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while you guys are working. Hopefully I'll remember to restart it. So, let me go ahead and go over these 3. Again, I kind of always try to follow the same process, so you kind of know the steps that I take. Hypotenuse, which one was the hypotenuse? 26, so mark that. I'm standing at Z, so if I walk across the triangle, this is O, this is O. So I get the 3 sides marked. Then cosine, based on my relationships, was AH. So AH, 24, 26. And like I said, yes, you can reduce that, but don't even worry about reducing it. It's one more place you might make a mistake. You can use that when you're doing the next worksheet, so just leave it like that. Don't worry about reducing. We good on number 4? Moving on. 5 and 6. Mark your 3 sides. Longest side is H. I'm standing at A, so if I walk across the triangle, O, then A. So there's my 3 sides. Tangent, opposite, adjacent. Opposite is 21, adjacent is 20. Opposite, adjacent. The last one then is another sign. Mark your hypotenuse, longest side. I'm standing at A this time because there's an A there. Opposite, adjacent. So there's my three sides. Sine is opposite hypotenuse. Remember, that's the SOH. SOH, S-O-H. So the opposite was 15. The hypotenuse was 25. So 15, 25. 15, 25. Those three. Are we okay? Now, there are 6 more on the back. I'm going to give you probably about 3 or 4 minutes to do the next 6. If you don't get done at that point, no big deal. But if you do get done, I will mark it and I will record it. If not, I'll look at it tomorrow. Now, that's not the only thing we're doing. That's just kind of step 1. Did they achieve any new mark? Okay, I'll mark the digit. Oh, let me pause this. The first worksheet, we're really even solving for anything. You're just trying to understand some relationships. Now we're going to use those relationships to solve for a missing angle. So I'm just going to kind of put those relationships back up here again, just so you've got them on this page also. And the only difference is you'll notice kind of when you look through the paper, there's some question marks. So the sign of the question mark, because when you're talking about the sign of something, you're looking at a degree, you're looking at an angle. So I'm just going to add the question mark in there. Equals opposite over hypotenuse. The cosine of the question mark adjacent hypotenuse. The tangent of the question mark opposite over adjacent. So it's pretty much the same relationships that I wrote before. The only thing different was I put the question mark in. Now, we're trying to solve for the degree. We're trying to solve for the question mark. So as in any algebra type thing, everything kind of has an opposite relationship. So when we had a square, we could square root to get the opposite. When we have the multiply, we could divide to get the opposite. So to solve for the question mark, we have to do the opposite of sine. And the opposite of sine is just the inverse sign. So the question mark then is going to be, to show the inverse sign, it's sine with a little -1 there. Opposite over hypotenuse. So the big thing with that is just knowing how to get it into the calculator when we actually get to the calculator steps. So to solve for the question mark, we're going to do the inverse of the sign. And same all along the board. Question mark, in this case, we're going to have to do the inverse of the cosine. So cosine with a little -1, adjacent hypotenuse. And then question mark, inverse tangent, opposite, adjacent. So if you're missing the degree, you're going to have to do the inverse of the trig function to find it. Now, the next thing I need you to do is to get your computer out. Yes, in theory, you can do this on your phone, but everybody's phone works a little bit different because everybody seems to have a different calculator on their phone. And I don't want to have to show lots of different people how to use their phone. I'd rather show everybody how to use their calculator on their computer. So please get your computer out. So everybody, get your computer out, open it up. I'll tell you where you're going here in just a moment. I'll tell you where I want you to go. So get your computers out. I'll tell you where you're going here in just a second. Does everybody have this written down?
Yeah.
So, from the Google, if you type in Desmos, Desmos calculator, you can hit Desmos calculator. It brings up two different calculators as the first two. The first one's a graphing calculator, the second one's a scientific calculator. Yes, they both will work, but the scientific one will be a little bit easier for what we're doing today. So you'll hit the scientific calculator. And then you should get a screen that looks like this. So make sure you have this calculator. Not the, I'm going to show you what the other one looks like. You don't want the one that looks like this. Yes, this would work, but it'll be easier to do it on the other one. So make sure you're on the scientific calculator. Does anybody need help getting to this calculator? Is everybody at this calculator? Everybody's at this calculator. Okay, I think we're in good shape. Now, we're just going to kind of leave it there for a second and go back to our page. So let's go back to the worksheet. So the worksheet. Wrong worksheet. This worksheet. So number one. What we're doing first isn't anything different than we did on the first worksheet. That's not going to change. I've got my triangle here. Now notice it didn't give me an angle this time up here like I said sine Z or cosine A or something like that. But it does give me a question mark. So I'm doing everything from the question mark. So the hypotenuse, longest side, that's the 36. Mark that. Same as I did the first one. From the question mark, the opposite must be 20. And the adjacent, there's nothing here. But I'm going to go ahead and mark the A there. But there's nothing there. Now, they didn't tell me what trig function I need to use. So I got to figure that out. Now, there's nothing at A. So that means I can't use an A. A is not available to us. So I need to pick a trig function that uses the H and the O or the O and the H. So which trig function uses those two sides? Sine. So I'm going to go sine of question mark. And we already know sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Sine of question mark, opposite hypotenuse is 20, 36. So 20, 36. Now I'm going to go ahead and write the next line, but you don't have to always write the next line. But I need to solve for the question mark, which is why I kind of put this stuff there on top to remind you to get to the question mark. You need to do the inverse of the sine function, 20 over 36. So I got to do the inverse trig function. And like I said, you don't always have to write that step, but I wanted to make sure and write it here on this first one. So I want to make sure everyone has that written. And then we're going to change back to the calculator. We're going to write this one down. Sine, question mark, 2036. Did everybody get that written down? So let's get back to the calculator. So from the calculator, you'll see down here I've got sine, cosine, tangent, but that's not the one that has the little -1. So what you're going to have to do is hit this function button. Now you'll see you've got sine, cosine, tangent, and then also the inverse of sine, cosine, and tangent. And we were using the inverse sine. So you'll click that. So you need a sign with a little -1. It gives you parentheses, so you're fine there. And then, I don't have any numbers, so I gotta hit the main one again. And type in 20 divided by, and again, it just shows it as a fraction. Division is just a fraction. 36. The other parenthesis is already there. If you want to hit the enter, you can. Now, notice, I've got 33.7, which means my degree is 34. Some of you may have something different and have like 0 point something. Who has like 0 point something? Okay. What happens is there's a little toggle button here. We're working in degrees. So my degree is 34, 33.7, which rounds to 34. If I was working in radians, which we haven't really talked about radians you don't really talk about until like trigonometry, then it would be, the radians would be 0.589. But we don't want to know how many radians, we want to know how many degrees. So if you get something that looks really weird, like way too small or something like that, or way, way too big, you're probably in the wrong thing here. You're going to need degrees. Did everybody get 34 now? Everybody okay on the 34?
Mm-hmm.
I want you to use the other calculator. So type in Desmos. You're fine. Go to the scientific calculator. It's just a little bit easier to look at this one. You'll hit the function button, hit the inverse sign, go back to the main, do the 20 over 36. And then you have your 34. And you could have used the other one. It's just, I think this one's a little easier for what we're doing. Does anybody else need help with their calculator? Let's look at the next problem. Next problem. Number 2. What are we doing on time? 9:17. We're doing great. All right. Step 1. Mark the hypotenuse. What's the hypotenuse?
39.
Which one?
39.
39. Here's my 90. Opposite of the 90 or the biggest side is the hypotenuse. Now I'm working from the question mark. So if I walk across, O is the side that doesn't have anything. So A must be 35. So mark this side first. Then you want to figure out which trig function am I going to have to use. So which trig function is this one going to use? Say it again.
The C1.
The C, the cosine. I can't use O because there's nothing there. So I have to use the trig function that has an A and an H. So cosine of the question mark is AH, adjacent hypotenuse. So cosine is adjacent hypotenuse. So therefore, cosine of the question mark, A was 35, hypotenuse is 39. Now we switch to the calculator. And like I said, you can write that last line, but you don't have to. So we're going to switch to the calculator. Have you had that written? Because once I switch, it's going to erase it on me. Everybody good? So switching to the calculator. So this time I need the cosine inverse. So again, you're going to have to hit the function button. Hit the inverse cosine. It was 35. And you can use the number buttons. That also works. 39. So I use the number buttons as opposed to switching back to main. Or you can switch back to main. Whichever works easier for you. The last parenthesis is already there. If you want to hit enter, you can. And you got 26 degrees. Again, if you have something really weird, you're probably in radians. But once you've picked degrees, it should stay at degrees. So my answer was 26. Does anybody need help getting to 26? Let's take a look at one more together, and then I'll tell you what I want you to try. So let's look at number 3. Number 3. Hypotenuse. Which side is the hypotenuse? It's the one that doesn't have anything. So it's the blank side. So this is H, but it doesn't have anything. Question mark. Opposite is 41. Adjacent is 34. So which trig function am I using this time? Tan. Because I can't use an H. Because there's nothing on H. So since I can't use an H, I got to use tan. So tan of question mark equals OA, 4134. If you need to keep track, OA, 4134. Then we're going to go back to the calculator. I need the inverse, so inverse tan. Again, you can either go back to the main button or you can just use your keyboard. 41/34. Enter. I got 50. So 50 degrees is my answer. We have about 9 minutes. What I would like you to do is to try 4, 5, 6. Just 4, 5, 6. Don't go on from there, just 4, 5, 6. If you get this done, have me take a look. If I haven't looked at the first worksheet yet, I can still look at the first worksheet if you got that done now. So 4, 5, 6, that's it. I'll only do the next 3. Tomorrow we'll pick up where we left off. So tomorrow we'll actually finish this.